Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight, a couple of great guests. I'm happy to announce that we have Mickey Norris and Chris Conrad here. Welcome back to the show. Welcome,
Thank
Mickey.
you. Good to be
They're
here.
over there, trust me. And then over in the wings we have Mr. John Cornett, who is going to play a song right after we do our hemp news. We have some video clips, and we'll be back in just a moment after these infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
All right, our first story tonight is from Lansing, Michigan. The key provisions of the state's voter-initiated marijuana measure will take effect next week. Members of Michigan's Board of State Canvassers certified the midterm election results on November 26, and Proposition 1, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, becomes law Thursday, December 6th. Provisions specific to the adult possession and cultivation of cannabis will take immediate effect. Those over the age of 21 may legally possess up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana and or 15 grams of cannabis concentrates in a private residence. Adults may also legally cultivate plants in private and possess the harvest up to 10 ounces of those plants. Public use of cannabis will remain a violation of law. Under the new law, the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs has up to 12 months to begin accepting applications from those seeking to operate licensed cannabis businesses. Michigan's the 10th state, not counting the District of Columbia, to regulate the adult use of marijuana and is the 9th to do so via voter initiative. From right here in the Beaver State, out of Salem, Oregon, tax revenue in Oregon from the sales of retail cannabis products is exceeding initial projections, according to an economic analysis published by state officials. For the period beginning January 1st, 2017, quote, tax collections have come in 7% higher than expected, end quote, the report finds. The authors added, quote, since Oregon levies its recreational tax based on the price of the product and the fact that actual tax collections have exceeded expectations is all the more impressive given the ongoing drop in prices, end quote. The average wholesale price for a gram of marijuana in Oregon has fallen from approximately $4 per gram at the beginning of 2017 to roughly $2 per gram today. The report says, quote, the long-term economic impact from recreational marijuana will come from higher value-added products like oils, creams, and edibles, in addition to niche specialty strains. These developments would be quite similar to the emergence and growth of craft beer in recent decades, end quote. Marijuana sales over the past 2 years have yielded over $152 million in new tax revenue for the state of Oregon, which exceeds the tax revenue from alcohol. Out of Loma Linda, California, a history of cannabis use is not associated with an increased likelihood of adverse outcomes among either those donating or receiving kidney organ transplants, according to data published in the Clinical Kidney Journal. I personally have dealt with over 100 people who've been denied access to transplants because they were using medical marijuana. I've seen all of those people die. A team of California researchers assessed whether cannabis use detrimentally impacts the health of those undergoing kidney transplants. Hospital staff in several states, as a matter of policy, refused to accept organ transplants from donors with a history of cannabis use, and also refused to permit those who use cannabis to be placed on waiting lists for transplants. The authors of this study concluded, quote, "There is no difference in renal function between marijuana-using donors and non-marijuana-using donor groups following kidney donation. In addition, there's no difference between marijuana kidney recipients and non-marijuana kidney recipient groups following transplant. It's hoped that the results of this study may encourage open dialogue and ultimately increase the kidney donor pool," end quote. Separate studies have previously reported that marijuana use is not contraindicated and in patients receiving either kidney transplants or liver transplants. Legislation enacted in 2 states, California and Maine, explicitly prohibit patients with a history of cannabis use from being denied organ transplants. Similar legislation was vetoed in New Mexico by Republican Governor Susana Martinez. This study, "Should donors who have used marijuana be considered candidates for living kidney donations?" appears in Clinical Kidney Journal this month. Out of Trenton, New Jersey, state lawmakers this week advanced a series of bills to regulate the adult use in medical cannabis markets and to vacate past marijuana-related convictions. On Monday, members of a 26-person joint committee moved New Jersey Senate Bill 2703 and Assembly Bill 4497 to the floor. The measure, entitled the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory and Expungement Aid Modernization Act, legalizes the personal possession and use of up to 1 ounce of cannabis by those aged 21 and older, and establishes regulations governing the commercial production and retail sale of the plant. Democratic Governor Phil Murphy, who campaigned on a pledge to legalize the adult use marijuana market, praised lawmakers for advancing the bill, although he has not yet endorsed the measure. Members of the Senate Health Committee and the Senate Budget Appropriations Committee there in New Jersey, along with members of the Assembly Appropriations Committee, also voted Monday to advance Senate Bill 10 to expand patient access to medical cannabis. The measure facilitates the expansion of additional medical cannabis growers and providers while also expanding the amount of cannabis a patient may legally purchase and possess. It further expands the pool of licensed health professionals who may recommend medical cannabis and shields registered patients from employment discrimination and the loss of child custody. It also phases out retail sales taxes on medical cannabis, among other changes. Separate language contained in Senate Bill 2426 to permit New Jersey physicians to recommend cannabis to any patient for whom they believe it will benefit is also incorporated into Senate Bill 10. Legislatures moved a third bill which expands the pool of those eligible to have their convictions expunged by the court. And in a separate hemp-related bill, New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy has signed legislation into law permitting the state to establish a pilot program to assess and promote the cultivation of industrial hemp. New Jersey's Assembly Bill 1330 and Senate Bill 3145 authorizes the Department of Agriculture there in New Jersey to partner with Rutgers University to promote and study the cultivation of industrial hemp to the maximum extent permitted by federal law. Given that the hemp has been included in the Farm Act, that should be pretty easy to do. Over 40 states have adopted similar legislation. Federal law permits states to engage in limited hemp production. Pending federal provisions, the Senate version H.R. 2, the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, also known as the 2018 Farm Bill, for the first time amends the Federal Controlled Substances Act of 1970 so that industrial hemp plants containing no more than 0.3% THC are no longer classified as Schedule I controlled substances. Earlier this month, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, guaranteed that the hemp-related provisions would remain in the bill following the reconciliation process. Out of New York, a spokesman for Governor Andrew Cuomo says that creating a framework for legalizing adult marijuana use is among his administration's priorities for the 2019 legislative session. According to the governor's office, quote, "The goal of this administration is to create a model program for regulated adult use marijuana, and we determined the best way to do that was to ensure our final proposal captures the views of everyday New Yorkers," end quote. Now that the listening sessions have concluded, the working group's begun assessing and reviewing the feedback they received and expect to introduce a formal comprehensive proposal during the 2019 legislative session. In July, a New York Health Department study commissioned by Governor Cuomo's office recommended legalizing adult marijuana use in commerce. It concluded, quote, "A regulated marijuana program enjoys broad support and would have significant health, social justice, and economic benefits. Regulating marijuana enables public health officials to minimize the potential risk of marijuana use through outreach, education, quantity limits at the point of sale, quality control, and consumer protection. The positive effects of a regulated marijuana market in New York State outweigh the potential negative impacts," end quote, the governor's office said in a press release. Just north in Hartford, Connecticut, Governor-elect Ned Lamont reaffirmed his support for regulating the adult-use cannabis market in Connecticut. Lamont is one of 4 gubernatorial candidates to be elected in November after campaigning on a platform that included legalizing marijuana. Speaking with reporters last week, Lamont said that he would work with lawmakers in 2019 to enact legislation to regulate the retail distribution of marijuana to adults. Legislators in 2018 debated 3 separate legalization bills. However, those efforts were eventually tabled due in large part to a lack of support from outgoing Governor Dan Malloy. Democratic legislatures in the House and Senate indicate that enacting adult use legislation is among the party's top 5 legislative priorities for 2019. Democrats control both legislative chambers in Connecticut. According to a 2018 statewide Quinnipiac University poll, 59% of Connecticut voters support legalizing the possession of personal use quantities of marijuana by adults. In our nation's capital, one of the U.S. Senate's leading marijuana prohibitionists, Iowa Republican Charles Grassley, will not be heading the Judiciary Committee in the 116th Congress. Representative Grassley announced on Friday that he is stepping down as leader of the committee. As chair, Grassley refused to hold any hearings or votes on marijuana-related legislation, including bipartisan legislative efforts like the STATES Act. Virtually all Senate legislation specific to marijuana policy must pass through the Judiciary Committee. Next in line to chair the committee is Republican Lindsey Graham, no friend of marijuana either, but not as bad as Grassley. Representative Grassley's decision to step down follows the retirement of House Judiciary Chair Bob Goodlatte, Republican from Virginia, and the failed re-election bid of House Rules Chair Pete Sessions, Republican from Dallas, Texas, both of whom also used their leadership powers to stifle any legislative debate on marijuana policy. Our last story tonight's from the Netherlands. The oral administration of cannabis extracts containing THC and CBD is associated with pain reduction in patients suffering from the skin disease epidermolysis bullosa, or EB, according to 3 case reports published in the British Journal of Dermatology. EB is a rare genetic condition that results in blistering skin. Dutch researchers assessed the use of cannabis extracts in 3 patients with EB. All 3 patients reported improved pain scores, reduced pruritus, and reduction in overall analgesic drug intake. They concluded that the findings, quote, warrant further investigations of cannabis-based medicines in controlled study settings in order to objectify the reported pain changes observed in these cases and close the gap between narrow treatment standards and patient needs, end quote. Earlier this year, U.S. investigators reported that topical administration of CBD in 3 patients with EB was associated with a reduction in pain and blistering and rapid wound healing, and the objective need for less analgesic medicines. This study combined THC and CBD to treat pain in epidermolysis bullosa. A report of 3 case studies appears in this month's edition of the British Journal of Dermatology. That's the end of our hemp news segment tonight, and Mr. John Cornett's ready to play us a song. Welcome back, John.
Thank you, Paul. Hey, what was that disease you just mentioned?
Epidermolysis bullosa, or EB. It's the easy way to say it.
Reminds me of that allergic reaction I got from the tape, the adhesive on my lip, where my lip just swelled up, got all red. And it was like
yeah, when you had that surgery recently and they taped some something to your mouth.
Leprosy for about a couple weeks. Anyway,
yeah, I think it's even worse than that. I think it's worse than that.
Anyway, this song is by demand. I think Gary Gilmore wrote this song. It's called "Wish You Were Here." I think Pink Floyd associated with that. So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell a green field from a cold steel rail, a smile from a veil? Do you think you can tell? Did they get you to trade your heroes for ghosts, hard ashes for trees, hot air for cool breeze, cold comfort for change? Did you exchange walk on part of the wall for a lead role in a cage? How I wish you were here. We're just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl, year after year, running over the same ground. What have we found? The same old fears. Wish you were here.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Gary Gilmore, for that one.
Yeah, David Gilmore. David Gilmore. It's David Gilmore. Gary was hung for murder. Yeah. Anyway, it's an honest mistake. Welcome back. It's good to have you guys back here. It's been a few years. You guys have been cutting-edge pioneers in the cannabis movement. I think I first heard about you, Chris, when you edited Jack Hare's book. Was that like the 3rd edition or something in the like 86 or 80? No, it must have been like 88 or 80.
The 90 edition, actually.
Oh, was it the 1990 edition?
We
okay.
brought in the 90s with The Emperor Wears No Clothes. I had already started working on other stuff in 88, so that was like somewhere down the road on my projects there. But that, of course, was a seminal moment for the movement because that edition of the book is one that went around the world.
Yeah. And then you wrote Hemp Lifeline of the Future, another really famous book, and you guys have co-written books. And
and it's nice that you have what you have here on the table is particularly significant because you got
we
the
call
hemp
our
oil.
Hemp Flame of Freedom. It's hemp oil and hemp.
And then the bast fiber for
this
the
is next week's wick.
We
slowly are going down to this.
And then the hempcrete, and particularly for us right now, you know, with the situation in California, you're talking about these governmental changes that are going on. Well, in California, the thing that we have is we've gone from Jerry Brown being the governor to Gavin Newsom. And the thing is that Brown was never really a supporter of us. He was like a very reluctant
Governor Moonbeam.
Yeah, I think the reason that he was not strong on our issues because of that nickname, as a matter of fact. I think that he was trying to like not be the marijuana guy. But basically what it amounted to was that he's been an obstacle to a lot of stuff over the years. And now the guy who's replacing him, Gavin Newsom, was the major proponent for the legalization initiative. And so we're hoping that we see a nice change here. And particularly the reason I'm saying that the hempcrete is interesting.
If those buildings had been built with hempcrete instead of wood, the fire wouldn't have burned them.
Yeah, in fact, we
might have jarred them a little.
Right. We went to an event down in San Diego where they had a hempcrete building, and the guy had a blowtorch, and he spent 5 minutes blowtorching it.
Yeah.
Not only did it not catch on fire, but it only went about 1/4 of an inch into the material.
Yeah.
And it was a 6-inch slab, so it was like nothing almost, you know. And when you look at what's happening in California, we think that
it's happening in Oregon and Washington and all over the world, too, you know.
But having Gavin Newsom there, we think is going to be a good indicator that we might be able to actually start bringing hemp industries in a way that Governor Brown was not. I mean, he wasn't opposed to it. He was just not helpful.
Right. Well, and new supermajorities in the California legislature with Governor Newsom there, we should see some really positive changes.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, we could use some positive changes in there.
And with the help with the Farm Bill, you know, hemp being included in that. You know, I remember our friend Gatewood Galbraith used to call,
R.I.P.
Used to say that Mitch McConnell was an alien. He's an alien. I don't know. He's not human. I remember. But,
and yet, ironically, he's been an ally for us on the hemp issue.
On hemp recently. He wasn't during our friend Gatewood Galbraith's life.
Yeah, I always credit Gatewood, though, that I don't think McConnell would not be doing what he's doing if Galbraith hadn't done what he did.
I went to Gatewood's funeral back in January of 2012, and McConnell said nice things about Gatewood.
He was there?
Yeah. No, he didn't go to the funeral. He didn't go to the funeral, but he put out a public statement praising Gatewood's lifetime of work. And the Democratic Party had signs on the billboards on the highway saying "Bye Gatewood" back then.
That's
it was
kind of nice.
sweet.
Yeah, I felt like, well, you know, Gatewood is, to me, one of the true pioneers.
Yeah.
Gatewood, Jack, myself, I see 3. But, you know, I put you way up there, too, because you guys had a Oregon hemp initiative before I even, you know, got involved with the movement.
Yeah, we put the second marijuana initiative ever to be voted on in the United States. The first was California's in 1972. The first Prop 19 is pretty ironic that in 2010, that we also had Prop 19 also for
in California.
In California.
And it lost both times too. And one of the ironies to me is that during the campaign, it was actually written by a major activist in California, Richard Lee, and not written by him. We were part of a committee. And, but I mean, he was the one who financed putting on the ballot. And he was a really strong ally of cannabis, and that yet there was this big resistance within the cannabis community saying, well, we could do better, blah, blah, blah.
That's what we heard here in Oregon.
And I always told him, I said, you know, we're not going to end up with better. If we vote this down, the next one is going to be more strict. And now we come in 2016, we have a more strict bill. All these people saying, I can't believe it's more strict. And I say, well, you should have paid attention because we don't see them getting more and more loose over time. Like the medical marijuana laws, California is the first one.
I think eventually it will, as the reality of what cannabis does beneficially.
Yeah, I call it the boomerang effect. You throw it towards the conservatives, and then hopefully it's going to come back around to something more progressive.
But here in Oregon, we had the same thing. You know, I kind of played Richard Lee's part here in Oregon. I spent a couple $1 million to put 2012's ballot measure 80 on the ballot. We lost with 47%. Fortunately, in Colorado and Washington, they won with about 55% each. But then they came back with a more restrictive bill and put it under the Liquor Control Board's power. And of course, that's another story.
Yeah,
but it's something very similar.
I think we just saw that Michigan's is a little bit looser than California's. They're allowing
our good friend Matt Abel definitely did a lot of good work in getting that.
Yeah, a lot of people there in Michigan, and they're allowed to possess 2.5 ounces. All the other initiatives only allow 1 ounce.
Yeah.
And you just said 15 grams of extracts.
Of
extracts. We only
that's
get
quite
8.
a bit.
Yeah, we only get 8 in California.
Yeah,
of course, that's a lot of dabs.
Yeah. That's true. That is, you know. I don't really do those dabs very often, but I wouldn't count on
that soon. People, this new era, this new age of legalization is so new, and people have been so brainwashed for so many years, and we've had to live through prohibition for so long. It's going to take a little getting used to. People, you know, having the right to consume and grow and share and give away.
Just this week, South Korea
sell it.
legalized medical marijuana, and that's a big step forward. It's the first East Asian country to
yeah,
legalize.
And we were just in
Mexico.
Mexico.
Is it just CBD? I'm not sure. It might be a CBD thing.
I'm not sure.
We were just down in
you
Mexico,
know.
and while we were there, the Supreme Court ruled that 5 grams of marijuana is a personal.
And that was the 5th time they made that ruling.
And that's
that
what I don't
5th
get. How come they keep having this ruling over
they
and over
had
again?
to have it 5 times to force the legislature to change it. Now that they've ruled 5 times that it's a violation of human rights under Mexico's constitution, now the legislature has to change the law. That was the rule. They had to have the Supreme Court make 5 rulings. You know, every different country has its own procedures.
The incoming president is more open.
AMLO. He's not only open, he's been an open advocate for some time.
And Vicente Fox, the former president, really wants it to move forward, you know.
Yeah.
So, so I
he's
think
been a lot of cannabis events over the past few years, and I think he's involved in the corporate structure as well.
Right, and this whole changeover in Congress, you know, the Democrats taking control of Congress, getting rid of Pete Sessions, as you mentioned earlier, that's one of the most important things that could have come out of that election. Losing the Democrats taking control of the committees, because we've got a lot of people that now they're saying they're going to move bills forward that have been stymied for the past 6 years under the Republican controlled legislature.
Well, you know, I want to just say quickly that we are live. If you're watching us right now, you can call in and ask us questions directly here at 503-288-4442. We also have a microphone for our studio audience members. If they want to come up and ask a question off camera, they're welcome to do that as well. And so go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, we've seen all this progress, and I know you're in the same position as we are, where we first got involved, people said it's impossible, it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen.
Then around
You're wasting
2008
your
or 2009, it became inevitable that it was going to happen. Or actually, I think after Prop 19,
after
it's
2010,
inevitable,
2011.
you know, and now there's coming to place. But there's the 3 aspects or 4 aspects of it. There's the medical use of cannabis, there's the industrial applications of hemp, and then there's the adult use. But then we have the overall social justice issue side of it. And so this is where it's rather frustrating, because all this progress we've made with
You both put out a book, Shattered Lives, about the social impact on families, how many people are in prison for life without the possibility of parole or 20, 30-year sentences.
Right, and it's not just the person in prison, it's their whole family, as you mentioned.
And it's not just the whole family, it's the country and what Congress and the Supreme Court has done in order to keep the drug war going. They've subverted our Bill of Rights and our, you know, the search and seizure, the asset forfeiture, and all these different things, and cruel and unusual punishments. But the interesting thing about the cruel and unusual punishments is that, you know, the Supreme Court ruled that, well, it's cruel, but it's not unusual. You know, so we can have this
now that we've been, since Ronald Reagan became president and allowed police to steal people's property, whether they have committed a crime or not, you know.
So we still have these mandatory minimum sentences that are still on the books. We still have the conspiracy laws that round up a lot of people who are very extremely low level or just based on hearsay from somebody else who's facing a long prison sentence, who needs their, you know, who wants some relief from that.
And so all the gains we've made on the medical marijuana, industrial hemp, personal adult use, the federal penalties have not changed one bit.
And people are still getting incredibly long
Exactly.
sentences.
And the only thing that's happening is that we've got the budget bill and the McIntosh decision that says that the federal government's not supposed to be spending money prosecuting people for things that are legal within their state under state law. But one of the things I do as an expert witness is going into the court and basically, you know, trying to convince the judge that everybody's following state law. It's just up to the judge whether he wants to do that or not.
Yeah, or
most
let
of the
juries hear it if it's going to a jury, right?
Well, but the idea is that they're not supposed to go to the jury because, and we've got a lot of people who've already been behind bars and they're not getting that to get their cases reheard. And now we've got this big reform bill that's being proposed in Congress, but it's not retroactive.
No, that's horrible.
Some of it, I think, might be retroactive.
Well, you know what?
Some of it might be.
I think that you know, cognitive liberty, the ability to think your own thoughts, is a critical freedom, just like the right to privacy. We need to expand natural individual rights, and I think cannabis is the hinge on which the future of freedom for humanity swings. Because, you know, if they can say we can't take cannabis, which is the oldest crop, it's the most productive crop, it's never caused anyone to die, can't have that one because it'll hurt the rich people's pocketbook. And you know, with the advance of artificial intelligence and robots in the pretty near future, if we don't protect human rights and natural rights, then the future of liberty is pretty grim. And so
I'm glad that Oregon actually is moving ahead with the psychedelic mushroom, the magic mushrooms initiative.
That's a good step.
I mean,
that's a good step. You know what? A moment ago you were talking about the 90s, and I remember back in 1989 I saw this on PBS. You know, we'd met. So we're going to run this little video. We'll be right back.
Like a truly beautiful plant. If you've ever read the writings of various people who've described it, George Washington had a lot of wonderful stuff to say about it. Thomas Jefferson loved it too. They were both hemp farmers. The Declaration of Independence was originally written on paper made of hemp. The Constitution was originally written on paper made of hemp. If we had sowed hemp here a few months ago, you wouldn't even be able to see the street here. It'd just be...
This is the 90s. People, places, and ideas from all over the world. Most of this week's program is about a common plant, hemp. Hemp is a plant that has been illegal to grow in the United States since 1937. One of the uses for the hemp plant is marijuana. There are also many other uses for hemp, including making paper.
But here we have some papers that are made from hemp. This one is, you see, just to give you a difference, this is like almost like a wood pulp here. This one, on the other hand, is a real soft paper you can use for wrapping paper for tea bags and things like this. For straining, or for coffee filters and so forth. We also, I don't have a sample with me, but we've got it to, you can make any kind of paper out of it. So your basic print runs. In fact, this, basically, I would say that this piece right here demonstrates to you exactly why marijuana is illegal. Because William Randolph Hearst, like I said, he had gotten the permits to cut down the trees in the northwest United States to make paper. But however, as you notice from this paper, it looks like newsprint. It's the same kind of a quality of paper as what you would get from cutting down trees. However, it only takes about 1/5 to 1/8 as much of the chemicals, and it lasts something like 5 to 10 times longer. And it's just as recyclable and just as good in every other way. And you don't have to cut down any trees for it at all. And so Hearst realized that if there was something else out there that could do all these things without cutting down trees, that a lot of people wouldn't want the trees cut down. And so therefore he had to eliminate the one thing that could come between him and being able to make those millions and billions of dollars by cutting down and deforesting the northwestern United States. And so all of a sudden, marijuana became a big problem, as it turned out. William Randolph Hearst discovered that marijuana was a big problem, which no one else had ever heard of before. It was coming up from Mexico. No one knew anything about it, but it seemed to drive people insane and cause violence and do all these horrible things. Well, something had to be done. And
he had the media to make sure that the population knew it.
Right. Yeah. Newspapers all over the country, from Florida to California, suddenly realized that marijuana is a big problem. And people were wearing their Levi jeans made out of hemp and reading about marijuana. And no one knew what it was, but it was like the devil's weed or something that was coming up from Mexico. And everybody knew that Mexicans were lazy, you know, and blacks were smoking it. It turned out they discovered that people in New Orleans, the black people, were smoking this. And not only that, but then white people were smoking it with them. And then the blacks and the whites were hanging out together. And then you know what else was happening? That sometimes when blacks and whites were walking down the street, the blacks wouldn't step out of the way when the whites came from the other direction. And they were even known to look white people in the eye. They were like stepping on their shadows. The situation was getting completely out of control in America. And it was all because of marijuana, which no one had ever heard of before. But it became very important that we have a law on the book. And in 1937, the DuPont family, the Mellons, the Hearsts, etc., had a series of secret meetings where they were discussing what could be done about this marijuana problem that's facing this country. And so they came up with the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, which went into effect in 1938. And curiously enough, after the name, it didn't talk about marijuana anymore. From then on, it talked about hemp. But the name of the act was the Marijuana Tax Act. And so when they were having the hearings finally about it, they had someone from the the Seed Oil Institute come and talk about the long history of people eating hemp seed and doing all these things with the hemp seed. And the AMA came and said, look, we can't make this plant illegal. It's
There's some background noise.
the most useful. There's some background noise. 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 There's some background noise.
Yeah, there was some background noise on that. I wonder where that was coming from. It sounded like some. Anyway,
hey,
we were younger back then.
we were so young. You know, I'll tell you, when we first got involved with this, and Chris took this on as a project, a 5-year plan in '89. We thought it would take 5 years.
That was made.
Right, yeah. That was
We
one of the
thought
first things that happened.
you know, it'd take 5 years to, you know, once people got informed and educated,
Yeah.
you know, they won't stand for prohibition anymore. And
Well, you know what our friend Gatewood said, who comes on right after you on that video from, you know, back when the 90s was in the future. He said it's the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of a bitches that did it. And that's a pretty powerful group to be against.
it took us a lot longer than 5 years.
That's kind of my feeling about it.
But you know, the
took us
thing is, it was
28
really,
years
the
to
thing
get
is, things moved
legalization.
fast right off the bat, because remember, '88 we had Judge Francis Young make his decision there. In the beginning of 1990, I actually got an article in the Wall Street Journal about it. We had this program on it in '89.
And you founded the
Business
Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp and the Hemp Industry Association.
Well, the Hemp Industry Association grew out of it. I formed BAC, but then there was like the CHEAC, Cannabis Hemp Industry. What did the C stand for? Yeah, there was another group, and then there was BAC, and we joined together and created the HIA. But so we had that, and
but
we
he
had
was the first president.
But the HIA, yeah, you were the first president, and it's still one of the leading, if not the leading, hemp lobbyists and promotion
Right, and I got to be on the board when we took on the DEA over hemp seed oil or hemp seed in foods, and that was we're basically almost the only lawsuit yet that's really knocked the DEA back and made them stop doing something, you know. But then in '91 we had our first industrial hemp bill introduced in New York, and by '94 we had the HIA. We had you guys were importing, your company was bringing
the hemp paper with my Tree for Eco paper. I recently found someone else had posted the schedule for the hemp conference at Lewis and Clark College here, which was in January of 1990. So just after that video.
Wow.
And you and I and Jack.
Yeah, that's when we met, I think.
Yeah, I think it was.
We might have met before that, but it seems like it was that one.
All the memories are so dim. I mean, we're talking, 30 years
But it's not because of smoking cannabis.
No, it's not. That's preserved it to some degree. It's because it's 30 years,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, just on the memory and cannabis thing, I want to point out that in 1998, John Morgan and Lynn Zimmer were at a party that I was at, and Lynn Zimmer said, we were all smoking cannabis, although I guess we can say that now. It's long enough. But
let's give it back.
I've never been in the closet myself.
They're the authors of Marijuana Myths, Marijuana Facts, a very important book.
And so Lynn Zimmer said to me, she wanted
to...
in New York University or something like that.
And so Lynn said to me, about smoking marijuana, that she was concerned about how it affects memory. And so she said, you've been smoking? I said, yeah. And she says, if I give you 4 random words, well, let's see if you can remember them. So she gave me 4 words. Heretofore perfect, Constantinople.
Here it is. 30 years later, you can
now, so at this moment, illuminate. And so anyway, I know the 4 words. And that's been more than, it's been 20 years now since we had that conversation.
No one's ever said my memory was bad. I've never.
My problem is that Lynn forgot what the 4 words were, so she could.
Couldn't verify.
But she was stoned.
Yeah, she was stoned at the time. Yeah, right.
Hey, don't blame the pot.
It's not the pot.
Yeah, no. In fact,
one of the things that pot is useful for is because it does allow you to selectively forget things, and forgetting things is important. If you remember everybody's face that you ever saw, what else could you think about? But with people
PTSD.
Who have post-traumatic stress, whether it be war or some traumatic incident, it's good not to have nightmares. I notice when I smoke marijuana, I don't remember my dreams almost all the time. But when I go without for a week, boy, I have these vivid dreams.
We did this when we took a trip to Australia, and Australia's not as cannabis friendly as you might think it was. So we didn't have very much cannabis, and so I started remembering my dreams. And it turns out that almost all my dreams are trying to get something done, and things get in the way, and it stops me from getting whatever is done. And I thought, well, that's what my life is like.
That's everybody's life, right?
I don't need to have that in my sleep. So I'm fine. Go ahead. I can lose those dreams.
And yet it's good for Alzheimer's prevention. So.
And so we totally honor cannabis anyway. One of the things that we've been working on is cantheism, which you probably remember I actually first discussed Cantheism in 1995 or 6 or something like that, where, as a First Amendment religious use of cannabis argument based on the First and the 14th Amendments, but really derived. What I did was I coined the term Cantheism to refer to the sacramental use of cannabis that goes back at least 5,000 years.
Yeah, I mean the holy anointing oil of Judaism and Christ means anointed one. That was a heavily cannabis concentrate. You look at the Buddha. What did he eat? 1 hemp seed, 1 marijuana seed a day. In China, they still burn hemp paper and wear hemp clothing, and they had a series of using hemp called the wufu, which the closer that the person was to being the patriarch of your clan, the more uncomfortable your clothing had to be and the longer you had to wear it to worship your ancestors, which is the traditional religious practice in China. Then you go to Japan, Shinto religion. I mean, you know, right. It's in all the religions.
The emperor's coronation involved it.
Yeah, it still does. They have to grow. You know, the hemp conference that was in Kyoto was named after your first book on hemp, Lifeline to the Future. You couldn't make it in person, but you had a video. But while I was there, I got to meet the people who grow hemp for the emperor's family and for all the Shinto temples. All Shinto temples have hemp ornaments all around them.
So what I did basically is I just took the fact that we have, and not to mention the Rastafarians, the Coptics, the Zoroastrians, etc., all these religions that use it, and I try to find some commonalities of them and say that it's not, what Cantheism is not that marijuana is God or anything like that, but that people use cannabis to get closer to God, to nature. We have a lot of people, we've been having some gatherings of people doing Cantheistic events, and one of the things that we found is a lot of people who don't consider themselves even religious still feel like they get a spiritual benefit from cannabis, and they still feel like they're using sacramentally to connect with nature or even with themselves. And so, you know, you don't even have to believe in God.
I've always felt that in the same
And in fact, it's an ironic thing with cannabis. You have the depersonalization where you kind of get to observe yourself, but you also feel more connected to yourself at the same time.
We've co-evolved with cannabis. There's no doubt about that. You look at dogs, and dogs were first domesticated 8,000 to 12,000 years ago, and they were all wolves. Canis familiaris is the Latin name for wolf. And now all dogs are called Canis lupus familiaris is dogs. That's right. The wolves were Canis lupus, but dogs are Canis lupus familiaris. But we have bulldogs, we have poodles, we have Great Danes, and that's just in less than 10,000 years of selective breeding. Well, hemp has been cultivated more than twice that long. It has changed us, and we have changed it. I think that's why hemp seed is the perfect protein for human consumption in terms of being most absorbable.
And Carl Sagan actually advanced that theory. And also he thought that human consciousness perhaps came from cannabis. He didn't say that it did. But
in his book, The Dragons of Eden.
Wouldn't it be interesting if it did? And, you know, maybe it did. Or some people think mushrooms and stuff like that. I mean, it's the question about where human...
That was Jack's thing. Jack Hare.
And also the Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. I forget the name of the author of that book. But
well, we've been getting into exploring now that we everything has just gotten so commercialized. We feel it's important for people to recognize the other aspects. Why did people really want cannabis? And a lot of them want it for the effects that it has on us, and
but I think a lot of people feel that spirituality.
They definitely do.
A greater appreciation of nature and their surroundings. You know?
And right.
And you see it, you know, in all these different religions. I don't think that's a coincidence.
I think it's a great teacher.
I think it's incredibly important that we restore that for the future of freedom and cognitive liberty.
And we're concerned that the next generation is going to just treat it as a commodity, and so and the other thing is,
I don't think that'll happen, because I think the plant will demand different.
Right.
You know, that as people use it more and more, they'll be awakened, you know.
Yeah, and that's actually something where Jack Hare and I had a disagreement. He felt like, you know, we had to have this perfect law, and that was the only thing that we could do. And to me, I think that I believe in cannabis enough that if the law is not perfect, that over time, our experience
the
with
incremental changes as well.
And I just think that it's, you know, I believe in the plant so much that I just can't think that we can keep holding it down anyway. You know, it's going to come back whether.
I think cannabis is a great teacher, and it has compelled us. You know, when I use it, I feel like it's compelled me to work for social justice and the environment, and to be a better person.
Orrin
And a
Hatch.
lot of people feel that too. Yeah, and Senator Orrin Hatch once said, you know how you could tell your kids are getting into cannabis? Is if all of a sudden they care about social justice and the environment like it was a bad thing.
No,
you know?
that's a warning. You need to get them in treatment for marijuana.
so,
You remember
know,
Steve
it's
Covey's The
interesting.
Politics of Consciousness,
Right,
that the plants are talking to, trying to wake us up, and I think that's happening finally. I hope so anyway, because we don't have a lot of time to make these changes to protect our environment and expand
That's right.
individual rights.
Yeah, in fact, that was the premise of my book, Hemp Lifeline of the Future, is that we only have a short window of time left to use hemp to solve these different problems. It's not that hemp is the solution, but hemp with people is the solution.
I really love the first chapter where you wake up in your hemp sheets, and you take your bath with your hemp towels, and you take your hemp cereal, and a lot of that's becoming true. You know, we can go. Like you said, I first went to a marijuana event, the Yippee Smoke-In 1978, but I didn't think when I got involved that 40 years later it wouldn't already be legal either, but well, fortunately it wasn't quite 40 years.
Yeah, right. And in my case, I would say that one of the reasons I was hugely politically involved in a lot of movements, but not the marijuana movement, because I just thought it was so obvious it was going to just solve itself by like 1980 or so. And then we saw Reagan come in 1980.
That caused a huge change. The Just Say No movement definitely turned things back.
Zero
We have
tolerance.
this last video. We're running out of time with about 9 minutes, but we have this video from the Cannabis News Network. There's like a 5-part, 6-part series, and I think this is part 2 or 4, activism. We're going to roll that. We'll be right back.
We're going to win this thing with love. You don't win with love. You have two different things that are going on. You have...
We met at an anti-Reagan rally, actually,
Yeah.
back in 1981.
I was picked at a few days ago in California by some youngsters that had signs that said, "Make love, not war." Trouble is, they didn't look like they were capable of doing either. This fellow that was doing the talking had a haircut like Tarzan, he walked like Jane, and smelled like Cheetah.
Back in 81, yeah, at a protest.
What happened really though was I got into an argument with some other activists, and I said, let's do something to legalize marijuana, and they all said, it's impossible, you can't do that. So I said, I don't like to hear that, I think I'm going to come up with a plan of what to do. And then a niece of ours went, she was in what the DARE program is, it's the anti-marijuana program they had in schools in California back then. I was so angry at what they told her that I knew wasn't true. And so I told her, well, what they're teaching you is not true. And then when I did my research, that's when I found out more about industrial hemp. And how important it is to save the forests, and how important it is for the farming economy, and how important it is for the environment in general. And that got me really angry because I was a very heavy environmental activist. All these different things that I've been fighting, and so it all came into one package.
Civil rights, human rights, social justice as well. Well, the young people are obviously the future of the world, and so we need their involvement. They tend to be much better at social media, and they could put their skills to use by spreading information and starting petitions and doing all kinds of different things. There's a group in the United States called Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Students for Sensible Drug Policy, to make sure that students are taken care of. Faculty.
I don't know if they're here too. That's an excellent organization to get involved with because they're just so intelligent. They've got the passion. They've got the information. They know what they can do, and so I encourage them to get involved with that too.
Activism can become a lifestyle, and it should become a lifestyle. We're going to win this thing with love. You don't win with love. You have two different things that are going on. You have, you win sometimes, and then it makes you feel good.
Right now, Los Angeles' market is bigger than Colorado and Washington combined. So you're looking at one market that's the largest in the world.
And when you lose, it should make you angry, and that anger should make you want to do more. But if you just go with love, then you're probably not going to be that much of an activist.
But as far as love is concerned, you might just meet your soulmate doing activism as well. You know, we did. We met at a protest, so you know, I'd highly recommend it.
They didn't look like they were capable of doing either.
So if you can fall in love with an activist, that's good too.
Your source of cannabis news. Cannabis News Network.
I guess they didn't. The next part is about meeting Jack Herrer.
Oh, you got the wrong video. I like that one anyway. And you know, it just reminds me that what Mickey was saying about the importance of young people. I don't know about you, but we definitely need help with internet and social media and stuff like that because they keep changing it on us. So, you know, we could do it in the 90s, but now
how would they reach you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, the best way in most cases is email at case@chrisconrad.com. But then they get to our website.
Case, the word
case, like in a
you're
court
an
case.
expert witness. I've been an expert witness, not as many times as you have, but quite a bit.
Case like suitcase or court case at chrisconrad.com, and my main website is chrisconrad.com. But we also have a news website, theleafonline.com.
The Leaf, that's been doing real well.
And we used to have we've done a lot of stuff.
I used to advertise when the before the corporate raiders.
Yeah, right.
Made us turn this banner around. So we're having our cameras move around there, but hey, we're all volunteer here, you know. So here we are. So
and we're on Facebook and things like that as well, so people can reach us that way. But you know, all the change of technology have. I mean, you know, it's like we started off with like photocopied pictures, and that was like how we got the word out, and long distance telephone.
Back when cut and paste meant scissors and glue. You know,
exactly.
It wasn't a computer process before personal computers were
right.
Out
there. But nowadays, you know, I find I spend more time figuring out how to make things work than I actually spend getting the things done. So
every different app and program or technology has its own learning curve. You know, it takes a while. So the kids have nothing better to do.
Yeah, right. And there's a.
Well, they do.
It's developed for an intuitive sense, but over time they keep changing it, and our intuition is not the same as young people today. And so, you know, this is where the interface between the generations is so important. And I think it's one of the critical things that we're seeing on the political front, though, is that the way young voters have been so consistently supportive of legalization that it's driving the political agenda nationally. And so, you know, this is such an important thing. Why we need to keep young people involved, and why young people need to vote. And the fewer people who vote, the more important your vote is, because that means your vote has a higher percentage, fraction of a percent, influence on what's going on. Another thing that's going on today, though, is that, you know, we need to get some people moving out of the coastal areas, which are threatened by global warming, and getting into the interior of the country,
like Michigan and North Dakota.
Yeah, and the Dakotas, Wyoming, these states that have such a conservative background. Well, young people can't afford to live on the coast anymore. If they move inland, that's going to be beneficial for the whole country.
Yeah,
I think it's going to create opportunities. It's going to develop the economies in those states. It's going to reduce the pressures on the coast. It's going to give them a more protected environment, and they can work with computers and not have to be located in a particular area. Yeah. So I think that the opportunity for young people today is astounding.
Well, we got about a minute and a half left on the show, and so the best way to reach you, Mickey, same thing, case at chrisconrad.com.
And Facebook too. And
yeah, Facebook's always
Mickey Norris there. You can
right.
find me there. And yep. We're still, now that we've legalized it in California.
And you were some of the main spokespeople fighting I like to call them the hippie dream people. Like, let's make it like tomatoes, which it should be, but you can't do that at the first, you can't make that jump, really.
We didn't make that argument of let's make it like tomatoes, even though that
right. That's the hippie dream people.
Yeah, that was the hippie
those
dream.
are the people who attacked us because we wanted to see some sensible regulation.
Yeah,
we call them stoners against legalization because they got high, which was true. But then, as far as they, you know, the thing is that it is.
You know what?
Like
I got to cut you off because we're down to about 45 seconds left.
Okay.
I want to thank you guys for coming on.
Thank
Go to
you.
Case at Chris Conrad.
We'll talk more about tomatoes next.
Yeah. And come back more often. We had a great conversation here. Thanks for watching. Here's John Cornette. Thanks for watching. Help restore hemp.
Just one big family, once united, we are free. Now's the time to make a plan. Do the best that each one can. We're just one big family, once united, we are free. Now's the time to make a stand. Do the best. Yeah!